This is Debt Free in 30, where every week we talk to industry experts about debt, money, and personal finance. Here's your host, Doug Hoyes.
Let's start today's show with a pop quiz. Which age group has the fastest growing rate of insolvency? The answer, I'm sorry to say, is seniors. As regular listeners to Debt Free in 30 know, every 2 years we do a detailed analysis of all of the data we're required to gather from all of our clients, and we discovered a disturbing trend. An ever-growing percentage of our clients are seniors. 4 years ago, 9% of our clients were aged 60 and over. 2 years ago, it was 10%. Now it's 12%, and I suspect when we crunch the numbers again next year or the year after, that percentage will be even higher. So what's happening? Aren't seniors supposed to be living their golden years? Why are an ever-increasing number of seniors experiencing financial problems? That's the mystery we're going to address today. So to discuss it, let's welcome back to the show my Hoyes Michaelis co-founder and business partner, Ted Michaelis. Ted, how are you doing today?
Fine, thank you. This is a depressing subject.
It is. But we're going to hopefully have some positive practical advice to end the show with, so stick with us on that. So Ted, I want your opinion about what's happening, but before you give me your thoughts, let me tell you some numbers. And at the time they file a bankruptcy or a consumer proposal with us at Hoyes Michaelis, seniors have unsecured debt of just over $64,000, which is the highest of all
That's
age
a big
group.
number.
It's a huge number. So let's start with some definitions here. I'm talking about unsecured debt. What is unsecured debt?
All right, to keep it really simple, unsecured debt is debt that you've acquired that has no collateral or anything backing it up. So I just used a technical term to answer a technical term that doesn't help. Let's do the opposite. What's a secured debt? A secured debt is a mortgage, a car loan, something that if you don't make your payments, they've got the right to come and take that thing away from you. So unsecured debts are things where they don't have the right to come and take something. Their recourse is to take legal action against you, try to garnish your wages, maybe seize your bank account, that sort of thing.
So we're talking about something that has debt with nothing attached to it.
Yeah, typical examples are credit cards, lines of credit, personal loans, payday loans, income taxes.
We'll get to that. Just hold your fire on that one. Yes, income taxes would also be an unsecured debt. So there was a recent report issued by Equifax that said that debt excluding mortgages held by those over age 65 averaged $15,244 in the fourth quarter of last year, so 2016. That was below the Canadian average of $22,000. But those over 65 posted the highest percentage growth compared with fourth quarter of 2015 at 6.1% growth. So it's not just in our client base where seniors are taking on more debt. So, Ted, break it down for us. How much do seniors who file a bankruptcy or a consumer proposal owe? And I just told you what the general population owes, around $15,000. What do our clients who are seniors owe?
So seniors, we're talking about people that are 60 years of age or older. So the unsecured total, $65,000, which is significantly higher than any other category and what the average is. So the average, you kind of missed yourself up there. $15,000 was the average for all seniors, $22,000 for all Canadians, and our average senior client is $65,000.
Yeah, and obviously
it's a huge number.
We're quoting a slightly different number than Equifax because they're defining it as 65 and over. But you get the point. It's a massive number. So
it's $20,000 worth of personal loans. It's $25,000 worth of credit card debt, $12,000 worth of taxes, and then $5,000 or $6,000 worth of everything else. And I know you don't want me to talk about that yet.
Yeah, and we'll get to the everything else. Other than that, every other category. Well, I mean, when it comes to credit cards, for example, seniors are the highest. They're more
carrying
debt
the most
than
debt.
Other,
That's right.
Debt. So why? Why is it? Why is it that seniors have more credit card debt than anyone else? And maybe to answer that question, we want to stay away from the technical stuff. So tell me a story. Tell me about the kind of people that you meet with, seniors who have credit card debt. What's the typical story?
Let's talk about a lady that came in to see me yesterday. She is 62 is my guess, so she certainly looked much better than that, right? In case she's listening. She had $75,000 in unsecured debt.
So even slightly higher than our normal senior client.
And the reason for that was, at some point, 5 or 6 years ago, she got sick. And so she stopped looking after filing her taxes, doing anything else. She used to be the vice president for a company, so she was paid very well. Now she's on long-term disability because she had some health issues. And of that $75,000, she's a little unusual in that half of it is income tax. because she didn't file her taxes and now she owes money. The other half was credit cards, because what she found was when they put her on the long-term disability, her income was 2/3 of what it used to be, and she didn't plan for that. She didn't make adjustments. So she thought that I'm going to go on making and living the way that I have, and suddenly her income was 2/3 what it used to be. And that's just not a sustainable model.
Yeah, and obviously I don't know this person because I wasn't in the meeting with you yesterday. But in her own defense, it's kind of hard to adjust your life instantly.
Well, and that's always the biggest problem that any of our clients experience. Something can happen to your income overnight. You can get laid off. You can get sick. Your job can move to Indiana or Mexico or Taiwan, and your income just changes. You cannot change your expenses overnight. But as a senior, you can plan for some of this stuff. One of the problems they experience is they're carrying debt into retirement. And that's just a bad plan on a number of different levels.
Yeah, you certainly want to be going into retirement without debt. And when we say that it's very difficult to change expenses overnight, well, I own a house.
Yeah, your mortgage or your rent is whatever it is.
My rent, I can't change that tomorrow. I can't instantly break my 1-year lease or sell my house instantly.
And everybody says that when you retire, your expenses go down. I don't believe that that's true. I mean, so you're not going to work anymore, so maybe you don't need the same clothes. Most of the seniors I've ever encountered are becoming more active in other things, so they still have all the same expenses. And in fact, because now there's more leisure and recreation, some of them are spending more, and there's no income supporting it.
Well, and they're spending perhaps more time with their kids and their grandkids, and as a result, they're taking them places and so on. So, well, and you mentioned disability. Let me give you a couple more numbers. We know that of our clients who are seniors, 56% are retired. Okay, that makes sense because we're making seniors a pretty wide swath, 60-year-old people, 80-year-old people. So obviously the younger people aren't yet retired. 6% are on disability. So obviously a big percentage of our seniors are living on a fixed income. Our average senior client has a monthly income of $2,141. So that's not a huge amount of money. So when you talk to your clients who are having this cash flow issue, where does that money go?
Well, so let's continue with these examples of average things. If the average income is $2,100 a month and the average debt level is $65,000, the minimum payments on $65,000 are more than $2,100 a month.
And there's the problem right there. Your debt has to keep going up. So
now, and seniors will accumulate new debt to pay old debt. Because most seniors were brought up on I have to find a way to pay my bills. And so even if they went into retirement without debt because they haven't been able to adjust their living expenses, to make ends meet, they will borrow more to make sure they make those payments. And that becomes just a downward spiral.
Yeah, and you also made the point earlier that the particular person you met with yesterday had a good job in the past. The only way a senior or anyone can owe $64,000 is if they had good credit in the past.
That's exactly right. You had to have a good history to get that kind of debt.
Or else there's no way they'd be able to borrow. So we said that seniors owe more on credit cards than any other age group, and you explained why, but they also owe more in taxes than any other age group. Our average client, age 60 or over, owes almost $13,000 in taxes. Now, that's the average client. Some obviously don't owe any taxes. 47% of our senior clients, so that's almost half, have tax debt. And of those who owe taxes, they owe over $27,000, I guess $26,000 in taxes.
And intuitively, that makes sense.
Which is a third of their total unsecured debt. So that's a huge number. So give me another real-life example, and you kind of touched on one already, of a senior who owed taxes. But tell me the story. Why is it someone would owe taxes, and how does it all pan out?
So let's think about John. That's not his real name. Who saw me just a couple of days ago. He now has a government pension, and he has an employment pension, and he has a survivor's pension because unfortunately his spouse passed. So none of these pensions actually plan on the other pension income. So when they set up their tax deductions, their withholdings, it's assuming that this is all the money that John's making. Well, between his 3 separate pensions now, John's been pushed into a higher category. So even if they were taking the proper amount for themselves, he's jumped up a notch. So now the amount of tax they're deducting is about a third lower than it should be. And they've been doing that to John now for 8 years.
Well, and this is a really key point. So let's emphasize it, exactly what you're talking about. And I see this it almost always happens in the first year of retirement.
Yes.
So I'm working at a job and I'm in the 30% tax bracket or whatever. They're taking taxes off my paycheck. I retire, let's say, middle of the year in June. My pension starts in July. So the pension company, which could be a private pension, it could be CPP, OAS, whatever it is, all they know about is their pension.
Right.
So they say, oh, it's halfway through the year. We're only going to pay you $6,000 in pension this year, so you're in the 10% tax bracket. And your other pension, the same thing, 10%. The other thing, when you add all those together, everyone took off 10%, but you're really in the 30% bracket.
Correct.
But with your employment income, maybe that pushes you into the 40%.
Yep.
They're not taking off enough taxes. So practical advice, I guess, on this point, and we're going to get to practical advice later, but since we're on the subject, what is your practical advice then for somebody who has multiple sources of pension income and is afraid they're going to owe too much in taxes?
So this doesn't apply just to seniors. This is to anybody, because we have more young people that are working 2, 3, 4 jobs part-time instead of that one full-time career. When you have multiple sources of income, you need to talk to a tax planner, somebody that can estimate what your total income is going to be so that you can set aside the right amount of tax. And our advice usually is, so if you've got, say, 3 sources of pension income, maybe what you do is you tell the government to take a lot extra off on theirs so that you know that it's being paid by one source, and you don't see it. You don't have to worry about it. And you don't have to worry about talking to the other pensions. But the trick is to make sure you figure out what that number is going to be and make a plan to deal with it in advance.
Yeah, and it doesn't matter which source of income it comes off. It's all going into the same pot.
Correct.
Well, and I'll give you a trick. If you don't have a tax planner or somebody to do this for you, whoever did your taxes last year, and maybe you did them yourself, you got a computer program, whatever, take last year's tax program, punch in the new numbers, and see how much it says you're going to owe in taxes. And yes, it won't be right to the penny correct, but it'll give you at least a ballpark figure. And if it says, okay, we know how much is coming off, we know how much you're going to owe an extra, $1,200 next year. Well, I guess you better be having them take $100 a month off.
Man, simpler still, just what was the tax bill for last year? If you owed them $1,200, set aside an extra $100 a month. If you owed $2,500, $200 a month. It's all pretty basic, but you have to take the time to think it through.
Yeah, and that, of course, assumes your income is going to be comparable, which it usually is if you've been retired for a year.
Yep.
The other place I see seniors getting into massive tax trouble is with RSPs. So you take money out of your RSP to help pay the taxes or other living expenses, and now you owe money on RSPs. So how does that happen?
The whole plan with RSPs from the government's perspective was that you would take that lump sum of money, you would turn it into an annuity that you're getting from a life insurance company or someone else, so you slowly draw that money down over time, so the tax burden shouldn't be significant. But what you were just talking about is the people that need to take a lump sum out. So I'm getting 2 or 3 pensions. I've got a comfortable living, but for whatever reason, I needed $25,000 or $30,000 as a lump sum. I take that out as one chunk of money. They're only going to withhold a little bit of tax on it, but you've taken yourself from a low tax bracket to a very high tax bracket, because half of that money that you withdrew probably should have been set aside for taxes.
Yeah, and we're not tax experts, so we're not going to quote any numbers here, but if you take out, let's say, $5,000 or less from an RSP, they're going to take off, this much in tax.
10%.
I don't know what the number is, 10% or whatever. If you took out $100,000, well, then they'd be taking out a much higher percentage. But if you took out $5,000 every week, they're only taking 10% off each of those withdrawals.
Well, and on top of that, your investment advisor will tell you to do it that way, so they only take the 10% off, so you get more of the money.
Yeah, but you still owe the tax on the whole thing at the end of the year. So we see that as a very common thing. So again, think about this before you start taking money out of an RSP and make sure you're setting aside the tax.
Well, and you know what the kicker is? Folks, you should be contacting somebody like Doug or I before you start taking money out of RSPs to deal with debt. Money in RSPs is protected. So I know you're thinking, I've got to deal with this debt. There are better ways to do it.
So what are you talking about?
Well, so let's say that you're this average senior that owes $65,000, but you've got money in an RSP. Well, so if you had $100,000 in your RSP and you took it out, you could pay off the $65,000. The other $35,000 would go to tax, and you'd have nothing. Or you could file a proposal to your creditors to repay a portion of that $65,000. The RSP is protected under law, so you'd still have it, and you could deal with it over time. Probably the proposal, you'd pay back $20,000. That might be another show, but...
Yeah, and we'll put some links in the show notes over at hoys.com that explain this in more detail, but the quick version of it is, if you file a bankruptcy, the trustee, us, isn't going to take your RSP except to the extent of whatever contributions you've made in the last year.
Yeah, we're just not allowed to. They're protected.
It's federal law. Federal law says we cannot take your RSP except for what you've contributed in the last 12 months. So, yeah, it almost doesn't make sense to do exactly what you just described. I've got $100,000 in my RSP. I take it out. I got to pay 30 or 40 grand in tax to pay off my 60,000. So now my debts are gone, but also my RSP is gone.
Yep.
I've lost $100,000 to pay 60,000 in debt. It might have made more sense to file a consumer proposal where over time we offer to pay 20 or 30,000.
And my advice would be to take that $100,000, turn it into a RIF, so you've got a monthly stream of income coming from it, and use that monthly stream of income to pay the proposal.
And obviously, again, we're not giving investment advice here, and RIFs, you have to be a certain age and all the rest of it.
The important thing is to recognize that there are options other than just liquidating everything that you own.
So if you have a lot of debt, talk to a licensed insolvency trustee such as us, and if you've got an investment advisor, talk to them as well. But make sure you talk to both, because Ted gave a perfect example of the investment advisor trying to do you a favor by having you take your RSP out in little pieces, which is great for cash flow this year, but is horrible for next year. So, okay, final point. And again, we've talked about taking money out of RSPs to pay taxes and other living costs. You end up owing even more in taxes. It ends up being a vicious cycle. And so, well, what happens when you're in a vicious cycle like that? Well, this is a topic we've discussed many times. In fact, it was the topic on our very first show. That was 143 episodes ago, back in 2014.
Back when we were young, man.
When we were just kids. And that was, of course, payday loans. 11% of our senior clients have payday loans. It always does. Well, and I like to get you going by mentioning it.
Yep.
Our senior clients owe a total of almost $3,600 in payday loans. So again, only 11% of them, only 11% of them have payday loans, but it is a massive number, $3,600, which may not sound like a massive number, but it's a massive number when you figure what the cost is. So tell us a final story here, Ted, about how it is possible for a senior to get into payday loan trouble.
All right, folks. So you understand how payday loans work. If you have a regular stream of income, they will advance you money on your next payment. So a pension is a perfectly regular source of income. Last 3 days of the month, every month, that money is going to show up, so they know you can pay off the loan. So they will loan you money against that money coming in. And so remember what I said a little earlier. Seniors are, what's the word I'm looking for? They've educated themselves that if they have a debt, it has to be paid.
Yeah, I think the word
money's
is
got to come.
Honorable.
Honorable. There you go. That's honorable. No good deed ever goes unpunished.
There you go.
They find a way to make the payment. And unfortunately, what that means is once they've maxed out their credit cards, maxed out their lines of credit, used any savings that they have, well, if they need quick cash in the middle of the month to make that loan payment, they go get a payday loan. And so let's do some math about payday loans. You borrow $500, then you're going to pay them back in 2 weeks $550, $560. The interest rate is something ridiculous, 548% annually.
Yeah, I mean, the maximum a payday loan company in Ontario can charge, and we're recording this in 2017.
Right.
The numbers were higher last year, and they're scheduled to go down again next year, but it's $18 on $100. So if you borrow $100 for 2 weeks and pay it back, you're paying back $18, obviously, which sounds like 18%, 18 out of 100, but no, it's 18 over 2 weeks.
Right.
You could multiply that by 26 weeks. That comes to 468% annual interest. That's why we say it's a massive number.
Well, and this $3,600. So 36 times 18, 360 plus another 270. It's $630 a month of interest charges, plus you got to repay the loan.
Yeah, and when you're on a fixed income, it's just impossible.
Well, what was that average fixed income we had? It was
just over $2,100.
So
it's impossible because I've still got to pay my rent and buy my groceries and everything else. So it's just not possible. So you run into seniors who get into this situation, and it's essentially they're honorable people. They want to pay their debts, but they just can't.
And again, and you hit it on the head. They deluded themselves into thinking that $18 for $100 in 2 weeks is 18% interest. So, okay, it's expensive, but no more than a credit card. It's just not true. It's 548% interest. It's ridiculously expensive.
Yeah, so we're not big fans of payday loans in case you
never have been.
Didn't read between the lines there. So, okay, so we've now had like 3 depressing stories in the row about fixed incomes and payday loans and so on. I don't want to end the show on a depressing note.
Let's talk about something
So
positive.
let's end with some practical advice for seniors with debt. So if you're a senior, this is advice for you, or if you have parents who are seniors. And I mean, just yesterday I met with a lady who brought in her mother. So it's very common to be helping out your parents, even if you're an adult. So this is also for you. You may be the only person who can talk to them and give them some advice because, again, seniors have paid their bills their whole life. They've always had good credit. They've never been in this situation, and now they're on a fixed income, and
it's
they
issues
can't
of
do
pride.
It. Yeah,
You know?
and we're all like that.
Yep.
So you may be the only one who can actually reach out to them. So Ted, you're meeting with someone, you're talking to someone who's a senior who's got debt, or the child of a senior who's got debt. Give me some practical advice, things that they can do to deal with that debt.
All right. Well, so the most important single element is to make sure that they're not going to incur any new debt. So we've got to find a way to make them live within their means. You know how much income is coming in. That's what they've got available to live on. So if it costs them more to live than they've got coming in, then they're accumulating more debt, and whatever solution I come up with to deal with the debt isn't going to work because the debt's just getting bigger every month.
Got to deal with the underlying problem.
Number one, that's right, deal with the underlying problem. Then number two, all right, let's get a handle on just how big the debt is. So we're going to do an inventory. Credit cards, personal loans, payday loans, income taxes. Figure out what the debts are, what the interest rates are on these debts, and let's try to prioritize so that we can get rid of the highest, most expensive debts first. Now, in most cases, when somebody comes to see us, there's more debt than can be dealt with in any kind of prioritizing. There just isn't money available to pay off the payday loans and then the credit cards and then the lines of credit. So we need a scheme that's going to be more all-encompassing, more global, which is when we start looking at some of the legal options that people have, proposals, bankruptcies, debt management programs, that sort of thing.
Yeah, and we do a lot of consumer proposals for seniors because if they're on a fixed income, I mean, I see it all the time. They've got their pension, but maybe they also work part-time.
Yep.
You know, put in a couple of hours a day at the local garden center during the summer. They, work at a retail store or whatever. So their income is high enough that they can afford to pay something back. They just can't pay the full amount back.
And in all honesty, they generally feel better about that solution than the bankruptcy. There are times when bankruptcy is the right answer, folks. It means you cannot deal with the debts. You should walk away from it. There are also times when people will say, you know what, I will go out and get that part-time job so that I can repay a portion of the debt. Now we're back to the whole honorable senior, the pride goes before the fall.
They want to do it. And,
right.
and I think that's a good thing. I think taking responsibility and saying, yeah, you know what, stuff happened, but I still want to deal with it is totally a good thing. And just to be clear here, when you come in to see us, we're going to talk about all the options. We're not going to say, oh, well, you have to file a proposal or you have to go bankruptcy. We're going to explain the costs of both and let you decide. I want to give one final piece of advice here, and that is I am not a big fan of loaning money to adult children.
Oh, there's a reason for that.
Yeah, and the reason is they, may not be able to pay you back. I have dealt with, and I'm sure you have too, Ted, a lot of seniors who come in and I go, okay, well, you retired a couple of years ago. Everything was great. You had money in the bank. You had money in your RSPs, and now you got all this debt. What happened? Well, my son, my daughter got into trouble. They lost their job. They got divorced, so I helped them out. I made their payments. I did this. I did that. Unfortunately, I didn't do it with the cash I had. I used up all my cash, and then I had to start borrowing. I am not a big fan of borrowing to help someone else, which then puts you into a situation where now you need help.
Yeah, all you're doing is empowering the person that had the underlying problem. Now, I mean, you never stop being a parent. Doug and I are both parents. We get it. In fact, Doug's kids are at the point where they're going to start borrowing from him soon. Mine are a little younger than that. You're not actually helping somebody out. I mean, it's like that investment advisor that was telling them how to get the most cash out of your RSP by taking out in little pieces. Well, it's creating another problem later, and the other problem is always bigger. So you need to find a way to help your children without incurring debt yourself,
right.
or living through your savings.
That's the key. And I'm a big fan of helping people out. I think you should help your family out. Right. I just don't think you should go into massive debt to do it. So if you've got an extra $50 a month and you want to help your kids by giving them the $50, that's your money. Fantastic, do it.
Right.
But you hit on a key point. Find other ways to help them. So, okay, if the cost of daycare is getting to you, why don't I look after your kids a few days a week? Saves on the daycare, but doesn't cost me any money if I'm home and retired anyways. So
and we should warn people. We have seen extreme cases of this. mean, in my own practice, I work out of our Guelph office on a regular basis. We've referred 3 different cases to the local police over the past 5 years of elder abuse. So this was their children borrowing from them to the extent that they used all of their assets, then ran up all of the seniors' debt, and then left them high and dry where they couldn't deal with it.
It's a very sad situation, and a lot of the time it's just because you
in those cases, it was criminal.
Yep.
Right?
And, I mean, those are extreme cases, but
Correct.
I think the bottom line is you got to think before you're incurring any debt. But the good news is there are solutions out there to help with all of this. So
yes.
If you are faced with debt issues, like I said, give us a call, and we're more than happy to help you walk through it.
It's like anything else that you've experienced in your life. You're at the point where you're supposed to be enjoying your golden years, and so if you've encountered a problem that you're not familiar with, like having more debt than you've ever had before, talk to somebody that specializes in debt. Could be somebody at the bank, could be a counselor, could be somebody with your church or parish, could be somebody like Doug or I. You need someone that knows how to deal with these issues so that they can point you in the right direction. At the end of the day, you're going to make the decision. You're the adults. You decide what's right for you, but you need to get good information.
Excellent. Well, I think that's great advice, and I think that's a great way to end the show. So here's my advice. Debt problems don't go away on their own. That's what Ted just said, and it's particularly difficult if you're a senior on a fixed income. It's not like you can work a whole lot of overtime to make up the difference if there is no overtime because you're not working. So if you have more debt than you can handle, get help. And if your parents have more debt than they can handle, get them help. You can call our 310 Plan hotline and talk to an expert. The phone call's free. The initial consultation's free. Get the peace of mind today. Simple as that. That's our show for today. Ted, thanks for being here.
Always a pleasure.
Full show notes, including a full transcript of today's podcast, can be found at hoyes.com. That's HOYES.com. Until next week, I'm Doug Hoyes. That was Debt Free in 30.
Thanks for listening. That was Debt Free in 30.